In the dawn of time, when existence still unfolded in its primordial purity and eons were mere whispers in the cosmic expanse, Earth was an untouched garden, a paradise where harmony reigned over every atom. Life pulsed in symphony, and the first humans, still few and scattered across the pristine face of the world, lived in an almost ethereal innocence, their days marked by the silent contemplation of a creation unfolding in splendor. Mountains rose like monuments to the Creator's patience. Rivers flowed like veins of liquid silver, and ancestral forests guarded profound secrets within their verdant core. There was no shadow of malice, nor the specter of corruption that would later stain the heart of humanity. It was a forgotten golden age, a silent prelude to the dramas that would shake the foundations of the universe. Yet even in this idyllic setting of peace, a seed of unrest began to germinate in the farthest reaches of the cosmos, among the legions of celestial sentinels, beings of light and immeasurable power, designated to safeguard the order and balance of the young creation. A forbidden curiosity, a longing for something beyond what they had been granted, began to stir in their immortal spirits, a subtle omen of a storm brewing, capable of redefining the destiny of worlds. The air was still pure, but an almost imperceptible tension began to weave itself into the tapestry of reality, a dark thread amidst the brilliance of nascent existence, a silent warning of the fragility of perfection. Driven by a fascination bordering on obsession, a dissident group of 250 celestial watchers, led by the charismatic and restless Ramil, a being of blinding brilliance and immoderate ambition, began to contemplate Earth with different eyes. The daughters of men, with their ephemeral beauty and earthly vitality, exerted an irresistible magnetism upon them, an attraction that defied the sacred precepts of their existence. Ramil, whose eloquence was as vast as his power, summoned his followers to a secret conclave in the shadowy rifts of an ethereal plateau near the Cathar Nebula, a place where the veils between dimensions were thin. There, under the witness of distant and indifferent stars, they forged a dark pact, an oath sealed with the very essence of their immortal light, promising each other that they would descend together and that none would abandon the intent, sharing the eternal consequences of their transgression. "I fear," confessed Ramil in a voice that echoed primordial doubt, "that this path will consume me, and that I alone shall bear the burden of this audacity before the Most High." But the others, inflamed by his speech and the forbidden desire, responded in a thunderous unison. "Let us all swear and mutually curse ourselves with an inviolable vow, so that there be no retreat nor betrayal among us." And so, abandoning their celestial posts, they tore the veil of reality, their descent causing distortions in the fabric of space-time, a cataclysmic event that made the foundations of the Earth tremble. Mortals, upon witnessing the arrival of those resplendent beings whose forms radiated an unknown power and a terrifying beauty, were seized by a mixture of awe and dread. The decision was made, and the destiny of many was about to be irrevocably altered. If the journey of these ancient beings and their forbidden choices has already stirred your imagination, just imagine what is yet to come. To not miss a single detail of this epic saga and to discover the deepest secrets of the universe that we are unveiling, subscribe to the channel now and activate the notification bell. And since we are talking about pacts and decisions that change everything, tell us in the comments, what was the most forbidden or risky decision you have ever made in your life? Even knowing the possible consequences, share your story without getting yourself into trouble, of course. And let's see who had the audacity of a sentinel. In the cosmic blink of an eye, the celestial sentinels, now exiled by their own volition, established their dominion over Earth. Their forms, once purely ethereal, had partially adapted to the density of the material plane, yet still emanated an aura of power that subjugated mortals. Swiftly, they took wives from among the daughters of men, seduced by their magnificence and the promises of knowledge and power. The union between the divine and the terrestrial, between the immortal and the ephemeral, was a direct affront to the primordial laws of creation. And as the fruit of this transgression, children began to be born who defied nature itself. They were neither mere humans nor pure celestial beings. They were a new lineage, colossi of flesh and spirit, endowed with prodigious strength and a stature that made ordinary men appear as miniatures. They were the Nephilim, so named for the dark and profound color of their eyes, which seemed to absorb light itself, and for the resilience of their bodies, which were nearly impenetrable. The Sentinels, in their hubris, not only united with humans, but also revealed cosmic secrets and arcane arts that should have remained hidden. The manipulation of telluric energies, the language of the stars to predict destinies and influence wills, the alchemy capable of transmuting matter, and even the principles of primitive genetic engineering, with which they began to experiment, seeking to enhance their already formidable offspring. Earth, once a paradise of innocence, began to feel the weight of this profane wisdom, and the natural order of things was distorted with each new secret revealed, with each new titan that was born. The Nephilim grew in number and power, their presence a constant shadow over humanity. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of the heavenly watchers came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them. The same became mighty men, which were of old, men of renown. Their hunger was legendary and insatiable. Initially, they hunted the great beasts and fed on the most abundant fruits the earth offered. But soon, their voracity turned against men themselves, who became easy prey or reluctant servants. Not satisfied, they consumed the flocks, depleted the harvests, and devastated entire regions in their relentless pursuit of sustenance and power. The corrupting influence of the Watchers and the brutality of their children began to generate abominations, hybrid creatures resulting from profane experiments or unnatural unions began to emerge, bizarre mixtures between species that roamed the desolate lands, increasing the terror and chaos. One of the leaders of the Watchers, a being called Gadriel, known for his expertise in the arts of war, taught men to forge weapons from unknown metals, harder and more lethal than the bronze or iron of the time, such as the black steel of meteorites, and to build terrible siege engines. The women, instructed by other Watchers such as Nama, learned to weave enchantments of seduction and control, to use rare gems and pigments to create illusions, and to manipulate the emotions of others through exotic perfumes and hypnotic sounds. The earth was being contaminated in its essence, and the Creator watched with infinite sadness as his masterpiece was disfigured. And the Lord said, "My spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he also is flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. Nature itself seemed to weep. The skies darkened frequently, anomalous storms swept across continents, and a stench of putrefaction emanated from certain regions where the corruption was deepest. In the celestial realms, a heavy, judgment-laden silence hung among the legions of faithful angels. The emerald portals leading to the higher realms had closed, and the archangels, the Most High's most powerful emissaries, were placed on high alert. The Watchers had broken the sacred covenant of creation. The cosmic order had been irreparably violated. On Earth, fear had taken root. The Nephilim, with their overwhelming strength and innate cruelty, became despots, erecting themselves as gods among mortals. Their guttural voices sounded like the rumble of distant thunder, and the ground trembled beneath their heavy steps. Rivers of blood flowed in tribal battles, instigated by them, or in brutal sacrifices offered in their honor. Corruption spread like a plague, faster and more lethal than any wind. Nature protested in increasingly evident ways. The sun seemed paler, the seasons became erratic, birds migrated aimlessly, and animals once docile turned ferocious. It was as if the earth itself was sick, agonizing under the weight of a deep and fatal spiritual transgression. And then, amidst this pandemonium, the Creator turned his gaze upon a man who walked in righteousness, who had not bowed before the tyranny of the Titans, nor allowed himself to be seduced by the teachings of the fallen Watchers. A seer forgotten by the world, but whose name was revered in the heavens. His name was Enoch, a hermit who lived in the desolate mountains, a scholar of natural laws and an observer of the stars, not to divine, but to comprehend the greatness of the divine. He emerged from the shadows, his frail figure contrasting with the reigning brutality, and his voice, though calm, carried the weight of truth. Mattathias walked among the rough-hewn stone cities erected by the Nephilim, his bare feet treading the ground stained by violence and injustice. He entered the courtyards where the giants celebrated their profane conquests and where the Watchers transmitted their forbidden knowledge. Fearlessly, he raised his voice. "O you rebellious children of the firmament, who abandoned the sublime dwellings and defiled the earth with your passions and your cursed offspring. The Most High, the judge of all existence, will pronounce judgment upon your heads. The highest mountains will not conceal your guilt, nor will the depths of the abyss offer you safe refuge. Behold, there will come a time of cataclysmic purification, when the primordial waters will cover the entire face of the earth, and the memory of your deeds will be drowned in oblivion." The word of Enoch echoed through the valleys and resounded against the walls of the titanic fortresses. Few heeded him. The majority, composed of subjugated humans and the Titans and Watchers themselves, mocked his fragile figure and his apocalyptic words. "Who is this insignificant mortal to challenge our power?" the giants roared, while the Watchers laughed with disdain, confident in their strength and ancestral knowledge. However, in the recesses of their immortal hearts, some of the fallen angels felt a shiver of long-forgotten fear, for they recognized the spark of divine truth in the prophet's words. Meanwhile, in the heavens, the preparations for judgment intensified. The celestial hosts were summoned, and the time of divine patience was rapidly running out. This was only the beginning of the end of an age of darkness. The once fertile plains now bore the deep marks of colossal footprints and fields devastated by war and the giants' famine. Where vineyards and olive groves once flourished under a generous sun, now cyclopean cities of dark stone stood, built by the Herculean arms of the Nephilim. These, the offspring of an unholy union, ruled with relentless tyranny, their eyes gleaming like infernal embers in the twilight, their voices causing the hearts of men to shrink in dread. They were beautiful in their terrifying way, but their hearts were filled with unbridled pride, an intrinsic violence, and an insatiable thirst for power and control. They took for themselves all that they desired, men and women for servitude or pleasure, animals for sacrifice or sport, and the best lands for their domains. They imposed their will by brute force, for none dared resist their might. Entire peoples began to worship them as dark divinities, erecting altars in their honor, burning cruel sacrifices, and chanting praises to names like Gorgon, Arbal, Anaktur, and Gilgamesh-Ur, the most feared among them. The memory of the one true Creator began to fade from the minds and lips of men, replaced by fear and idolatrous worship. The Watchers, proud of their corrupted lineage, allowed the Titans to teach their own barbaric codes to the human tribes. War became the natural state of things. Smaller tribes were enslaved or decimated. Brutal tournaments among the Titans, where death was the entertainment, became macabre festivities. The city walls began to be adorned with the skulls of enemies, and the heavens seemed to weep with the sorrow of creation. Men, corrupted by this new system, imitated the giants' cruelty, Women instructed by Samira, a watcher versed in the occult arts of mental manipulation, mastered spells and potions that altered perception and will. Men utilized black bronze weapons and obsidian swords forged under the tutelage of Azazel, another leader of the Watchers. The entire world seemed bewitched by a web of evil. Despite public scorn, the words of Enoch planted a seed of doubt and dread in the core of the Watchers. Confronted with the prospect of divine judgment and vaguely remembering the glory they had abandoned, a belated despair began to consume them. Secretly, they sought Enoch, no longer with arrogance, but with a veiled plea. They brought him scrolls written with tears of fire, imploring forgiveness, asking him to intercede on their behalf with the Most High. They wanted him to carry their pleas to the Creator, hoping to reverse the fate they felt approaching. Enoch, his heart heavy with the sorrow of that rebellion and its consequences, accepted the petitions. In a profound vision, his consciousness was swept away to the thresholds of heaven, but the answer he brought was desolate. The judgment had already been sealed. The sentence was irrevocable. He returned with tear-filled eyes and declared to the Watchers, "You will not be granted peace nor forgiveness. Your offspring, the Nephilim, will be annihilated before your eyes, and you yourselves will witness the ruin of all that you have created and corrupted." A terrifying silence fell upon the fallen angels. For the first time in their long existence, they knew the true taste of absolute fear. While fear gnawed at the souls of the sentinels, on earth, the Nephilim, oblivious to the fate that awaited them, continued their escalation of arrogance. They began to construct towers ever taller, immense structures that defied the clouds, believing in their hubris that they could reach the heavens themselves and confront any power that existed there. But wisdom had long abandoned them, if they ever possessed it at all. Their gigantic bodies grew in power and mass, but their souls decayed under the weight of their own brutality and lack of purpose. Inevitably, they turned against each other. Bloody struggles for power and territory between different lineages of Titans began to erupt. Each clan desired to be the absolute lord of Earth. Each titanic leader yearned to subjugate their brothers and rivals. The Cyclopean cities, once symbols of their might, became battlefields, and the valleys filled with the thick black blood of fallen giants. The human tribes, caught in the midst of this colossal conflict, desperate for any relief, began to invoke any spiritual entity that promised them salvation or power, opening portals to deceitful spirits and shadowy entities that roamed the fringes of reality, teaching lies and further promoting perdition. The world plunged into irreversible chaos, a spiral of violence and depravity that seemed to have no end. And it was in this scenario of desolation and widespread madness that a new figure emerged in history, a beacon of hope amidst the darkness. A simple man, without the colossal stature of the Titans, devoid of the profane glory of the Sentinels, but possessing a pure heart and eyes that still turned sincerely to the heavens for guidance. His name was Noah, a simple farmer and boat builder known for his integrity and his refusal to participate in the prevailing corruption. As the Nephilim destroyed each other in fratricidal wars and cities crumbled under the weight of perversion and violence, Noah walked with the Creator in his heart. He was a just and upright man in his generation, an oasis of sanity in a desert of madness. His calloused hands worked the land diligently, but his spirit remained connected to the divine, seeking silence, justice, and faith amidst the turmoil. Universal corruption had reached such a point that even the natural order among animals had been perverted by some of the Watchers' genetic manipulations or by the chaotic influence of the environment. Hybrid monsters and deformed beasts lurked in the hills and forests. The pure lineage of humanity, that which had not yet been contaminated by the direct or indirect influence of the Watchers and their descendants, was on the verge of disappearing. But the Creator, in his infinite wisdom and selective mercy, found in Noah the last breath of fidelity, the last vestige of hope for a fresh start. And so, he called him. On a dark night, as Noah slept under the shelter of an ancient sycamore tree on his secluded property, an intense light, like a fire that does not burn, descended from the heavens. The glory of the Most High enveloped him, and he heard as Noah, with the help of his 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and their respective wives, toiled day after day building the colossal ark, following precise divine measurements and instructions. In the heavens, the Almighty's throne blazed with an incandescent light of justice. 4 prominent archangels, Michael, the commander of the celestial armies, Raphael, the divine healer, Gabriel, the messenger of God's strength, and Uriel, the light of God who would bring illumination upon the judgment, were gathered before the divine presence. The Creator's patience had run out. The earth cried out for justice. The souls of the murdered and corrupted innocents screamed from the dust. The hour of relentless judgment had arrived. Michael was ordered to confront and neutralize the remaining celestial watchers who still wielded nefarious influence. Raphael was tasked with capturing the leaders of the rebellion, such as Ramil and Azazel, and casting them into an abyss of dense darkness and eternal confinement. Gabriel would be sent to further incite discord and self-destructive war among the rival clans of the Nephilim, so that they would annihilate each other, fulfilling the prophecy of their own ruin. And Uriel would descend to announce the final judgment to the children of the earth, offering a last, faint chance of repentance for those few whose hearts were not yet completely hardened. On earth, Enoch, the prophet, was enraptured in spirit one last time. In the celestial realms, he saw the halls of fire and the rivers of light that flowed from the throne of the Most High. He saw the books of destiny being opened, the names of the righteous inscribed in gold, and the names of the rebels and their offspring being erased with consuming flames. A tear of profound sadness and reverence rolled down his aged face. Upon returning to earthly consciousness, he delivered the final prophecy to the watchers who still wandered, desperate. There will be no forgiveness for your transgression. You will be cast into the unfathomable depths of darkness. Your children will perish before your eyes, and the earth will be cleansed of your stain. And from the ashes of destruction, a new beginning will arise, purified and renewed. Azazel, the most depraved among the fallen angels, who had taught men the art of war, idolatry, the profanation of the body, and the manipulation of creation for selfish ends, was the first to be judged exemplarily. Raphael found him in the mountains of Dudael, a desolate and cursed place. With chains forged from pure celestial energy, the archangel subdued him, dragged him over sharp stones, and cast him into a dark abyss sealed with divine power to await the great day of final judgment. Gabriel, in turn, visited the strongholds of the Nephilim, sowing distrust, paranoia, and hatred among them. Giants who were once allies now accused each other of treachery and greed. The wars among the children of the Watchers themselves intensified, becoming a fratricidal bloodbath. It was the beginning of the end for their cursed race. Michael, the great prince of the armies of God, confronted the remaining Watchers, who hid in deep caves and abandoned palaces. Despite their still majestic appearance and their residual power, they trembled before the imposing presence of the servant of the Most High. One by one, they were chained with indestructible bonds and cast into underground abysses over which mountains of incandescent rock were erected, sealing them forever. And while the heavens waged their silent but definitive war, Noah built. Day after day, the ark took shape. A colossal structure over 500 feet long, 85 feet wide, and 50 feet high. A floating fortress built with faith, sweat, and the incorruptible wood of resinous acacia. Noah didn't question. He merely obeyed with a diligence that bordered on the sacred. People passing by or hearing rumors of his insane endeavor mocked him and his family. "Noah, where is your God now to help you with that giant wooden box?" some shouted. "Are you planning to sail the desert, you crazy old man?" others taunted. But Noah did not respond to the provocations. His focus was on the task entrusted to him, his heart at peace, despite the chaos and derision around him. God then spoke again to Noah when the work was nearly complete. "Come you and all your household into the ark, for I have seen that you are righteous before me in this generation. Take with you 7 pairs of all clean animals, the male and his female, and a pair of the animals that are not clean, the male and his female, and 7 pairs of the birds of the heavens also, male and female, to keep their offspring alive on the face of all the earth." And then a wondrous and inexplicable spectacle began to unfold. Animals of every species, in perfect pairs or in groups of 7, began to arrive from all directions, as if guided by a higher instinct. Birds with exotic plumage flew in formation and landed neatly near the ark. Reptiles of all sizes and shapes crawled toward the entrance. The great felines, the cervids, the wild bovines, all obeyed a voice that was not heard by human ears, but that resonated in the very essence of life, the command of the Creator. Clouds began to thicken on the horizon. The winds shifted direction, carrying a somber omen. The angelic hosts that had fulfilled their missions of judgment withdrew to the higher spheres. The Watchers were sealed in their abyssal prisons. The Nephilim, in their final throes, fought their last bloody battles, oblivious to the impending cataclysm. And then came the 7th day after the start of the final convocation. Noah entered the ark with his wife Naamah, his 3 sons, Semael, Camille, and Japhetiel, and their wives. The immense door of the ark was closed, not by human hands, but by the direct intervention of an invisible power, the hand of God himself. A deep and expectant silence took hold of everything. Outside, clouds as black as pitch formed insurmountable walls in the heavens. Lightning tore the firmament with a primordial fury. Nature no longer whispered its laments. Now it roared its anguish and its imminent convulsion. The rivers, once contained within their banks, began to overflow violently, their muddy waters invading plains and valleys. The wind swept across the mountains with the force of 1,000,000 demons. Creation, like a mother in excruciating labor, writhed in deep, agonizing groans. The time of mercy had ended. The time of judgment had arrived. Inside the ark, Noah and his family prayed in silence, their hearts a mixture of reverent awe and unwavering faith. The wood of the ark creaked with the first rumbles of thunder and the impact of the first waves, but the peace on Noah's face contrasted vividly with the panic that spread like wildfire outside. Men and women ran in desperation, seeking refuge in temples dedicated to their gods of stone and metal, calling out their names in vain. None answered. The door of the ark remained sealed, impenetrable. Then a terrifying sound was heard, a dull, deep rumble coming from the bowels of the earth. The fountains of the great abyss burst forth. On that day, all the subterranean springs of the great deep gushed forth with unimaginable force, and the floodgates of the heavens opened. Liquid columns of titanic proportions erupted from the ground, destroying cities and swallowing everything in their path. At the same time, from the skies, torrential rains fell like liquid blades, not mere drops, but a continuous and overwhelming deluge. It was judgment in its purest and most relentless form. The Nephilim, proud and arrogant as they always were, did not comprehend the magnitude of what was happening at first. Some laughed with disdain, others bristled at the interruption of their battles and feasts. They climbed the highest hills, scaled the towers they had built, trusting in their superhuman strength and stature. But the water respected neither height nor power. It continued to rise, relentless, inexorable. Gilgamesh-Ur, the most powerful among the Titans, roared against the stormy skies, his voice a thunderclap of fury and defiance. O you who dwell on high, is this your vengeance, your punishment for having loved the life and the power you gave us? But the sky did not answer, except with more lightning and deafening thunder. Ogyas, a colossus of the eastern mountains, tried to swim, his powerful arms cutting through the waters like gigantic oars, but even he, with all his stature and strength, found no firm ground. A gigantic whirlpool swallowed him into the dark depths. The screams were terrifying. Common humans cried and drowned en masse. The Nephilim howled in agony and impotent fury. The watchers, chained in the depths of darkness, heard the sounds of the destruction they had caused, the echo of the cataclysm resonating in their eternal prisons. In his abyssal prison, Azazel howled, his eyes once filled with pride and malice, now blinded by impenetrable darkness, the silence of the abyss broken only by the groans of the fallen angels, feeling the crushing weight of their rebellion. Noah, inside the ark, felt the violent impacts of the waves against the hull, but his faith remained as firm as a rock. God sailed with him. The rain continued for 45 days and 45 nights. The highest mountains were covered. No flesh that moved on the earth survived except those who were in the ark. The heavens, however, recorded every detail in their annals. In the celestial books, the names of the Nephilim and their lineage were erased with inextinguishable fire. The sky celebrated divine justice. The stars, once obscured by the corruption of the earth, shone again with renewed intensity. The cosmic balance had been re-equilibrated. In the submerged world, all was silence and desolation. The earth had been washed clean with the tears of judgment. The ark floated on the endless abyss, the waters covering every inch of the earth. It was as if the planet had been forgotten by creation, a watery orb, adrift in the cosmos. But God had not forgotten Noah and his promise. Days turned into weeks and months. A mighty wind began to blow across the face of the waters, sent by the Creator. Slowly, very slowly, the waters began to recede, and the ark, after 170 days adrift, rested gently on the peaks of the mountains of Aralu, a mountain range that rose majestically in the heart of a vast continent. Noah, following a divine impulse, first released a raven, which flew back and forth, unable to find dry land. Then he released a dove, which returned with nothing. 7 days later, he released the dove again, and it returned at dusk, bringing in its beak a fresh olive leaf. The time of agonizing waiting had come to an end. From a high window of the ark, Noah contemplated a transformed world, washed clean, purified. Nothing remained of the proud empires of the Nephilim. No defiant tower, no profane altar, no idolatrous statue. The memory of the giants would be buried in the mud of history, a cautionary tale for future ages. However, in the spiritual realms, something still stirred. Not all the dark echoes of the giants and their cursed parents had been completely silenced. In obscure regions of existence, remnants of the corrupted seed, spirits stripped of their titanic bodies, awaited in a latent state a new opportunity, a breach in the restored order to resurface. The earth would flourish again, but the shadows would still lurk on the fringes of reality. The ground was still damp and malleable when the ark finally settled completely. The waters had receded enough to reveal a bare world, devoid of cities, of war cries, of corrupted altars. Noah opened the great hatch and gazed at the clear horizon as if creation had been reborn after a painful and necessary childbirth. The first thing he did upon touching solid ground was to build an altar. Not of gold or precious stones, but of simple stones, piled up with trembling hands and a heart overflowing with gratitude. There he and his family offered sacrifices of pure animals whose smoke rose to the heavens like an incense of reconciliation and a new beginning. And the Lord smelled the pleasing aroma and said in his heart, "I will never again curse the ground because of man, for the intention of man's heart is evil from his youth. Neither will I ever strike down every living creature as I have done." God then sealed a new covenant, a promise of preservation. And in the night sky, a phenomenon never before seen manifested itself. A spectral arc, not of vibrant colors under the sun, but a silvery and ethereal halo around the full moon, a lunar spectre. "This is the sign of the covenant that I make between me and you and every living creature that is with you for all future generations. I have set my spectre in the clouds of the night around the moon, and it shall be a sign of the covenant between me and the earth." Noam and his sons, Semael, Camiel, and Japhetiel, began the arduous task of repopulating and cultivating the washed earth. They relearned how to sow and reap, to construct more permanent shelters, and to care for the animals that had been preserved in the ark. Generations were born and multiplied upon the face of the earth. Entire peoples emerged from the descendants of Noah, their languages diversified as they spread, and the lands were distributed among the clans. The planet continued its journey through the cosmos, now under the sign of the lunar spectre's promise. But in the silence of the newly born land, persistent echoes of the dark past still whispered in the nocturnal breezes and in the legends told around the campfires. Among the descendants of Camiel, whose lineage proved more susceptible to dangerous curiosities and a certain ancestral pride, ancient stories began to be rescued and retold. Legends of giant men of prodigious strength, tales of creatures of immense power who, in some mysterious way, had survived the great aquatic cataclysm or returned through a tainted genetic heritage that had resisted purification. The sacred scriptures and the annals of the sages do not precisely detail how, but they, the distant descendants or residual manifestations of the Nephilim, emerged again. Not with the same titanic splendor of yesteryear, nor with the same direct connection to the imprisoned sentinels, but still impressive in their stature and strength, and deeply threatening to the new human communities. Peoples such as the Anakim Children of the Mist, known for their height and ferocity, the Shadow Wanderers, pale giants who inhabited deep caves, the Emim Night Terrors, and the Zuzim Murmurers, began to occupy strategic territories, especially in the fertile lands of Canaan. Their bodies were noticeably larger than those of ordinary men, their war cries deeper and more terrifying, their clubs and axes of stone and primitive bronze, heavy as the trunk of a young tree. The cursed lineage of the Nephilim seemed to have left indelible traces, seeds of their essence residually mixed among men, waiting only for the right conditions to germinate again, even if in an attenuated form. Stories about these resurgent beings began to spread among tribes and generations. In Bashan, in the lands of the east, reigns a monarch who sleeps on a bed of black basalt almost 15 feet long, travelers reported. In the land of Canaan dwell the children of Anak, fearsome giants, direct descendants of the ancestral titans. Their cities are fortified with walls that reach the heavens, scouts warned. The accounts arrived like distant rumors, but they repeated with an eerie precision, painting a picture of an ancient terror that refused to die. The names of the giants and their clans changed according to the region and dialect, but the fear they inspired was universally the same. The echoes of the Watchers' rebellion and the tyranny of the Nephilim returned to haunt the descendants of righteous Noah. God, however, in his prescience, had set apart for himself a people who would descend from Abram, a shepherd and tribal leader from the lineage of Shem, a people who would be guided by divine promises, who would march through deserts and trials toward a promised land, and who, inevitably, would have to face the giants of the past once more, to purify the land and fulfill a sacred destiny. But that was a saga for future days, for generations yet to come. For now, the sons of Noah scattered. The descendants of Ham migrated to the south and west, founding cities in lands that would later be known as Mizraim and Canaan, and among them arose Nimrod, the mighty hunter and builder of empires. The children of Japheth multiplied in the lands of the north and east. And Shem preserved among his descendants the lineage of the promise, a lineage that would walk for centuries until the advent of a deliverer, the awaited Messiah. Even so, the threat of the giants would resurface with force. On a starry night, Noah, already an elder with more than 900 cycles of life, contemplated the lunar spectre. His face, now deeply furrowed by time, still maintained an unperturbed serenity. Beside him, Shem approached, bringing him a cup of fermented grape juice. The patriarch looked at the stars and then at his son and said with a tired but firm voice, "They are back, my son." Shem, confused, asked, "Who, my father?" Noah sighed, "The great ones. In lesser flesh perhaps, but with the same indomitable and corrupting spirit. The earth still groans under their steps." Noah rose slowly, leaning on his staff, and pointed to the lunar spectre that shone softly. "But the promise is there. As long as that silver halo shines, there will be hope, even when the ancient darkness tries to return." And then he withdrew to his tent. The days of Noah would end shortly thereafter, but his legacy and the memory of the cataclysm and the divine promise would remain. The memory of the flood would cross continents and eras. Distant peoples, from the icy peaks of the Andara mountain ranges to the fertile valleys of Mesopotamia, from Hebrew storytellers to Babylonian scribes, would all speak in their own way of a great flood and of gigantic beings that preceded the destruction. Noah died at 970 years. He was buried with honors among the mountains of Aralu, far from the future battlegrounds. His sons and descendants continued the story, and the giants, even weakened and scattered, continued to roam the border territories like disembodied shadows, ancient whispers, ghosts of the Watcher's era. But one day, men of indomitable courage would arise, men who would face the giants, not with the brute force of the titans, but with the unwavering faith of the prophets and the strength that emanates from the divine. And among them, a young shepherd, with a sling and a faith greater than any mountain, would rise to challenge the last great champion of the cursed lineage, sealing once and for all the fate of the remnants of that era of darkness and rebellion. Time passed like the breath of an ancestral wind over forgotten dunes. Civilizations rose from the ashes and mud left by the great flood. The sons of Noah multiplied, spread through the valleys and plains, and with them grew fragmented memories and ancestral fears. In the land of Canaan, increasingly concrete stories circulated among the nomadic tribes and the first settlements. They whispered about men of cyclopean stature, about impassable walls that guarded proud cities, about fortresses where the very heavens seemed to rest upon towers of solid stone. Among the inhabitants of that fertile and disputed land, there were names that carried the weight of ancient curses: the Anakim, sons of the mist, the wandering shadows, the Emim, night terrors, and the Zamzumim, also called murmurers. All of them considered children of the shadows, descendants of forgotten times, persistent echoes of the primordial transgression. It was in this scenario, laden with tension and imminent danger, that the people of Israel marched, guided by the mighty hand of Elohim, freed from slavery in Mizraim under the charismatic leadership of Moses, the lawgiver. They crossed the scorching desert with their eyes fixed on the promised land, a home that had been divinely assured to them. But before taking possession of this inheritance, it was necessary to face the ghosts of the past, the shadowy guardians of that land. The giants, or what remained of their fallen glory, were waiting. When the 12 explorers, one from each tribe, were sent by Moses to examine the land of Canaan, 10 of them returned with their hearts crushed by fear and disbelief. "The land is truly good and flows with milk and honey," they reported with trembling voices. "But the men who inhabit it are of great stature and indomitable strength. We saw there the sons of Anak, descendants of the ancient giants. In our own eyes, we seemed like grasshoppers before them, and so we also seemed in their eyes." The people wept bitterly upon hearing such a report. Fear paralyzed their souls. They wanted to stone their leaders and return to servitude in Mizraim, preferring known slavery to unknown terror. But two men, Joshua son of Nun and Caleb son of Jephunneh, rose against the tide of dread and despair. "Do not fear the people of this land," they exclaimed with conviction, "for we will devour them like bread. Their protection has departed from them, and the Eternal is with us. Do not fear them." These words of unwavering faith echoed like thunder in the camp. The unbelieving generation, however, sealed its fate and would die in the desert for its lack of trust. But the children of those who trusted in the divine promise would see the fall of the giants. And so, it was fulfilled. Under the determined command of Joshua, Israel crossed the Jordan River, and soon the inevitable confrontation took place. Cities like Hebron, Debir, and Anab, ancient fortresses of the Anakim, were taken by storm. The giants fell under the sharp sword of the faithful, their physical strength useless against divine intervention. But the most feared of all was yet to come. In the mountainous region of Bashan, east of the Jordan, reigned Og, surnamed the last of the wandering shadows. His bed, a colossal structure of iron and basalt, was famous for its dimensions. His body was gigantic, his reputation legendary, and his name made kings tremble on their thrones. But not Joshua. The Eternal said to Joshua, "Do not fear him, for I have delivered him into your hands, him and all his people and his land." And so Og, the last great giant king, fell in battle. Bashan was conquered, its pagan altars destroyed, and the shadow of the ancient past was torn by the light of obedience and faith. Still, it would not be the definitive end of the cursed lineage. Among the Philistines, a warrior people established on the coast, another infamous name would rise, a name that would echo through the centuries as a symbol of arrogance and brute power. Goliath, the champion of Gath, a warrior nearly 10 feet tall, armor gleaming with polished bronze and an arrogance overflowing in his eyes. For 49 days, he defied the armies of Israel before the valley of Elah. "Choose a man from among yourselves to come down against me. If he is able to fight with me and strike me down, we will be your servants. But if I prevail against him and strike him down, then you shall be our servants and serve us." Israel was silent, paralyzed by fear. Not even King Saul, with his own imposing stature, dared to face him. But then, coming from among the flocks of sheep, arose a young shepherd, with a simple staff in his hand, a leather pouch containing 5 smooth pebbles from the stream, and a faith that moved mountains. His name was David, son of Jesse, small in the eyes of the army and the giant, but a colossus before Elohim. The battlefield fell silent as the two champions took their positions. On one side, Goliath, the terror of the Philistines, nearly 10 feet of muscle, bronze, and contempt. On the other, a scrawny shepherd, without armor, only with his faith and his sling. "Am I a dog?" scoffed the giant, spitting on the ground with disdain, "that you come to me with sticks?" But David did not retreat a step. His eyes did not see the gleaming armor, nor the intimidating size of the warrior. His eyes saw the affront against the Holy One of Israel. "You come to me with a sword, and with a spear, and with a shield. But I come to you in the name of the Lord Tzvaot, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied." The sky seemed to hold its breath. Even the angels were silent to witness. And the stone flew from David's sling. A short, sharp whistle, a dry, dull impact on the giant's forehead. Goliath, the invincible, staggered and fell with the crash of an ancient tree felled by lightning. He fell with his face to the ground, his arrogance crushed under the weight of his own body. The ancestral terror that the giants inspired crumbled before pure and simple faith. David ran to him, took the giant's own massive sword, and with a sure blow beheaded him. The ground trembled. The Philistine army, seeing their unbeatable champion defeated in such a humiliating way, fled in panic. The fear that men felt for the giants now turned against the giants themselves. But that was not the end of the story of the giants. It was only the beginning of the final hunt for their cursed lineage. David would become king, a shepherd crowned with the bravery of a lion and the wisdom of a statesman. And under his reign, and that of his valiant warriors, the last generation of remaining giants would fall. First came Ishbi-Benob, who tried to kill David in a fierce battle. He carried a spear whose bronze point weighed 7.5 pounds, but he was struck down by Abishai, son of Zeruiah. Then came Saph, another descendant of the Wandering Shadows, who was killed by Sibbecai the Hushathite in another bloody battle. Next, Lami, the brother of Goliath of Gath, who also carried a spear with a shaft like a weaver's beam. He was defeated by Elhanan, son of Jair the Bethlehemite. And finally, an anonymous giant, described as having 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot, 24 digits in all, a monster in the eyes of men, but who fell like the others before David's warriors. The king was no longer the shepherd boy from the valley of Elah, but faith still guided his steps and strengthened his arm. And wherever he and his valiant men marched, the lineage of the giants fell, as if heaven itself were closing a cycle of corruption initiated in the cloudy days of Noah and the celestial watchers. The warriors who killed the last of the Wandering Shadows and the Anakim were not titans nor sons of fallen angels. They were ordinary men, shepherds, farmers, artisans. But each of them carried in their heart something that the giants, in all their strength and arrogance, never knew or understood: the living and powerful presence of the Most High God. And so, stone by stone, sword by sword, the profane lineage of the Nephilim and their cursed fathers, fragmented since the Great Flood and weakened through the ages, was being systematically eliminated from the face of the earth. The cities of the giants crumbled into forgotten ruins. Their names became dark legends, a warning to future generations. Their brutal deeds, an even greater admonition about the dangers of pride, rebellion, and separation from the divine. And their souls, the disembodied spirits of powerful and corrupted beings, continued to wander through the desolate regions of the invisible world, already defeated in essence, merely awaiting final judgment and the consummation of all things. And in the hearts of the faithful, an immutable certainty echoed, passed from generation to generation. It is not brute force that defeats the giants of life, whether they are literal or metaphorical. It is faith. And so we arrive at the conclusion of this epic journey, traversing millennia of struggles between light and shadow, faith and tyranny. If this reinterpretation of the saga of giants and the heroes who confronted them has resonated with your soul and broadened your horizons, imagine how much more we can explore together. Be sure to subscribe to our channel and delve headfirst into other narratives like this one. We are eager to know what impacted you the most in this story. Did any particular character or event leave a mark on you? And most importantly, what lessons do you draw to confront the giants in your own life? Share your reflections and your own stories of overcoming adversity here in the comments. Your experience enriches our community and inspires us to continue unraveling the mysteries of the past and the eternal truths. Thank you for joining us on this journey, and may the strength of faith always be with you.